So thank you so much, Dr. Nam, for being on the podcast with us today. We just have some quick questions, with everything that's going on when it comes to our president, he came into contact with COVID. He
Mm-hmm.
tested
Mm-hmm.
positive. They took him to
Yes.
Walter Reed. He was home within a matter of a few days.
3 days.
Yep.
As far as we know, he's still doing well. My
Yes.
question to you is this: if the most powerful man in the world, who is tested every single day,
Mm-hmm.
who
Right.
periodically wear his mask, and those are
Yep.
around him are tested, is it time for
Yep.
herd immunity?
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And if you look at, uh, you're absolutely right to point out that the president was surrounded by the most stringent precautions you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who came into, and I'm sure this, well, now that the president has COVID, actually, you don't really have to think about protecting him from COVID at this point, but because he's going to be immune for a while, so good Lord willing. But everybody who came into his presence was tested. But there is such a thing as, look, a false negative test.
Right.
So, this is your point is correct that we have to look at this issue in a global sense, a holistic sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been advocating for that common sense approach from the start of all of this. Of this pandemic and all right. And
Thank you.
right, exactly. And thank you. And everything that has been troubling us.
Right.
So you're right. We do need to approach COVID pragmatically.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand that young people who contract this infection are the source of a lot of our herd immunity. There's no question. We do not need to shut down schools or colleges or anywhere else to, in fact, we should be encouraging life to continue in full, because that is the way that we move toward the post-COVID world. And
Yes.
the vaccine's going to help us with that. But there's really no reason. And the key message of the president's experience is that he's been pushing for therapeutics to treat folks who might get very sick with COVID. He's been pushing for therapeutics to get them over that hump, right? He's been pushing for that since the very start of this. And he was totally right, because therapeutics that he's fought for every American, and every American can be enrolled in these protocols. Two of the agents that he received, two of the therapeutic measures, are considered investigational. They're still being studied. They're still getting data on them, and that's remdesivir, which stops the virus from multiplying, and the Regeneron antibody cocktail, which helps to imitate basically your body's immune response, but with antibodies that you receive intravenously. It's a very really neat therapeutic advance.
Mm-hmm.
And he has fought for all Americans to be able to have those. And he's been absolutely right. And when you can get, he may have been on his way to a pretty severe case of COVID, but when you can get those therapeutics, and admittedly, they're going to be extra aggressive with someone like the president because of his position in our national life. This is true.
Right.
But when you can have access to those therapeutics and you can come back, then there's really zero reason to fear this disease for most of us.
Right. Let us not forget about First Lady Melania, also tested positive for COVID, and she's doing
That's right.
Fairly well. Thank God for that. So I didn't want to leave her out.
Yep.
Okay.
No,
So
and Kaylee McEnany and everybody else seems to be doing just fine.
everybody seems to be doing well so far, and we have
What you expect.
Right. This is what we want, because remember now, this virus is a 99% recovery rate.
Exactly. 99+%
right.
below the age of 70. Yep.
Right. And it's therapeutic medicines to treat it. Now, I'm looking at the CDC guidelines and how they changed their guidelines. And it's almost like it's fear mongering to keep us, or keep the country wearing masks. Now, President Trump, His theory about masks is if you can't socially distance, wear your mask. You have Jim Crow Joe who wants to mandate masks around the country and wants to shut down the country. But what are your thoughts about this wearing of mask? When, you know, here's my theory. If you want to wear a mask, you wear your mask, but I don't agree with mandating it, because my theory is if God wanted me to wear a mask, why did he create nostrils?
That's right.
That's just my theory.
Well,
so just give me your thoughts about the mask.
Sure. Absolutely. And God has designed us miraculously. There's no question with amazing. I've had the privilege of, as you know, of studying the body and its workings in biology and in medicine. And God truly does, you know, he creates miracles every day. That said, he also has given us magnificent brains so that, you know, we can beat the odds in ways that generations before us could not. So here's the story with masks, because it really has been tough, because the scientific, quote unquote, right? Everybody says, listen to the science. Well, the science has in some ways kind of been all over the place. But here's the real story. If you wear an N95 type mask, which has a kind of filter that will grab those viruses, basically. Healthcare workers are the people who most frequently wear those kinds of masks. And you have to have one that's actually fitted to your face in such a way that none of your breath coming in or going out goes anywhere but through the mask. And if you do that, I mean, that's what healthcare workers do when they're treating patients who have the virus and are exuding the virus. And yes, we don't want, you know, we don't want anyone to get sick, but certainly we don't want our healthcare workers directly exposed to get sick. So that's how we protect them, is with that kind of mask. Most Americans are not wearing that kind of mask, and they're not wearing, even if they do have an N95. I have an N95 type mask at home, and I have a teeny tiny face. So, you know, it doesn't fit me, you know, it's loose, you know, and that's okay. I'm not taking care of patients right now, but it just illustrates most Americans are not wearing their masks that way. Well, if you're not wearing your mask that way, it is not going to function at 100%. Sorry to say to everybody, but you are not 100% protected. That's just a fact.
And it needs to be an N95. It needs to be an N95 mask, not just some piece of cloth across your face.
Right. It needs to be an N95 type mask, and it needs to be completely sealed. You know, so like you put, you know, like you put tape around it, or, you know, a gasket around it. That's what you need.
Then, since you said that, because I know the CDC just came out with flip-flopping on something else, and they want to say now that the virus is airborne. So if you're wearing a mask, if the virus is now airborne, okay, how do you plug your ears, and how do you cover your eyes?
Right.
How do you cover your the opening in your skin? I mean, how do you do that?
Right, and not only that, Dr. Nan, they also came out and they said that it can affect others who are more than 6 feet away. So if it can affect others, if COVID can affect others who are more than 6 feet away, when I walk into a restaurant and I have on a mask, when I sit down, I'm able to take off the mask. Where does COVID go then? I mean, the things, it just doesn't make sense to us. So just explain it a little bit.
No, you're right. You're right. If you really, you know, if a given individual wants to be absolutely sure not to be exposed to aerosolized viral particles that may be in the air, and there are a lot of circumstances that affect how realistic it would be to expect that kind of exposure. But let's just say, you know, you want to be 100% certain that you weren't being exposed. Well, for one thing, you'd probably, you know, stay home and make sure that anyone around you is wearing an N95 type mask, and that you're wearing an N95 type mask, just the way I stated to you, and that you're wearing a shield so that particles won't be able to get into your eyes. And you know, I'm an eye doctor. It is theoretically possible for particles to enter the tear layer, the moisture layer that sits on top of your eyes. It's a very important layer to keep your eyes working right. to keep the surface of your eyes nice and crystal clear. And those tears actually drain through teeny tiny holes that go into your nose and into your, through little tunnels that go into your nose and into your nasal passages. So in theory, you can get COVID that way.
So,
how much that's actually been documented, honestly, I don't know. But in theory, you could. Through your skin, no. But how can you transmit the virus to yourself through what you touch? Well, if you touch things and don't wash your hands and there's virus on these surfaces and you touch your eyes, nose, or mouth, then yes, you can give yourself the virus. So that's why the skin becomes important. Hand washing. And hand washing is great for everything.
So Dr. Nan, I was walking into the grocery store the other day and somebody was standing there and he wiped down the shopping cart and he said, I just sanitized the shopping cart. I said, the shopping cart is still outside here in the air. I said, so you can wipe it down as much as you want to. It's still going to attach itself to whatever is in the air. So now it brings me back to the shields that you just said. The shields are not sealed on the body. It's not sealed to the face. So it still have opening for anything to go inside of it. So why are we hiding from something we can't see and running from something that's invisible? Why can't we allow our immune system to do what it do? One more thing.
Well,
COVID-19, the vaccines that they're talking about, do not the vaccine have some of the coronavirus in it itself in order for you to
obtain great question.
Herd immunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me take the first aspect of that. I'm going to do 3 parts real fast. Anything that's outside, ultraviolet light is really quite good at inactivating viruses. So something sitting in sunlight, you're less likely to pick up active virus from that. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be smart about, if you touch a shopping cart, even if they just wiped it down, wipe the handles down, that's all helpful. There's nothing wrong with that. But you still want to wash your hands anytime, just as a blanket habit before you touch your eyes, nose, or mouth. When you come home from being out somewhere else, wash your hands. Easy. So that's 1. 2, shields will help prevent air currents from carrying virus into your eyes, let's say. So they can be useful in that way if you're really, really, really concerned about air currents carrying that virus, even if you have an N95 mask on. So that's the second part. The third part about vaccines. Several different types of vaccines are being tested to help us develop immunity. The whole purpose of the vaccine is to help us develop immunity without having to go through an illness. So our immune system can learn to recognize the virus in some important way. It will recognize the virus sufficiently that if it enters our bodies from from nature, so to speak, or from the human population, our immune systems are poised to go. It's like, aha, that's not supposed to be here, get it. But you don't develop a full-blown illness because your immune system acts so fast that the virus can't take over a lot of your cells. Viral infections work, and I know we talked about it a long time ago, but they're almost like little burrs. If you take a walk in the country, and I've done it myself, and you can pick up little burrs on your clothing or on your skin. A virus is kind of like a little burr. It can attach to your cells, but it's a burr with a very special ability to transform the target cells. In the case of COVID, it's the cells in the lining of your, nose and throat, and turn them into little virus manufacturing machines, and even in your respiratory passages deeper down. So they can, if you have an active infection and you haven't had a vaccine, then your body has to ramp up that whole response, and it takes a few days, which is why, and during that time, you may get very sick. You may not get sick at all. But it's, there are ways that we can predict who's going to get very sick, and sometimes it's just one of those things, and sometimes the flu will affect somebody, even a young person, in a really awful way. And, that's just, that's part of the diversity of nature. So the idea of a vaccine is that you can give it to folks, and it's, any vaccine that I can get, I get. It's like, I've got the hepatitis vaccine, I've had, my diphtheria vaccine, I've had, mumps vaccine, all the ones, flu vaccine, I get it every year, I recommend it highly. so that my body doesn't have to go through the nastiness of an infection. But they're developing several different kinds of vaccines, and they all take a little different approach. But the one that's likeliest to come to market first does contain a little piece of the virus's recipe. It gives your cells kind of a recipe to make itself, if you will. So the vaccine that's likeliest to come to market first contains a little piece of that recipe. And you receive the vaccine, and it does, induce some of your cells to make a little piece of the virus, not an entire virus. It's not an infection, but some of those cells will make enough of that, that piece of the virus. They call it a spike protein. That, if you should actually have the virus enter you, it'll be, it's like saying, I want you to recognize this face, and the way I'm going to do it is this face has a very distinctive nose. No other face has a nose like this one. It's a purple nose with, lots of green bumps. And then if your body, recognizes that purple nose with lots of green bumps on that virus's face, it'll go right for it, and you won't get an infection. That's the beauty of a vaccine, and it will not make an entire virus. It will not be an infection, but your body will be immunized, and that's wonderful.
Okay, so real quick, you mentioned something about the flu virus, and like I was going to say, I noticed that a lot of people, they still get sick after taking the flu vaccine. But
there's a couple reasons.
And I got it. I got what's going on. But now, I want to just switch real quick about hydroxychloroquine. Does the hydroxychloroquine also stop the replication of the virus like this Zithramor do as well?
Yes. Yeah. Well, just two quick things. One about flu vaccine. The likelihood that flu vaccine actually makes you sick is almost zero. So just to reassure everybody, but a couple things can happen with flu vaccine. One is you can get it, and you don't get it fast enough, and you've already been exposed to the flu, and it takes a good couple of weeks for your body to work up the immune response. That's one. Number two, the flu vaccine is based on predictions for what they think the flu virus is going to be like every year. Sometimes those predictions are not 100%. So, unfortunately, you can get the vaccine and still get the flu, but it's not because you got the vaccine. It's just because the vaccine didn't fully work. And also, there are a lot of other viruses that can make you just as sick as the flu, unfortunately, for which we don't have vaccines.
And so you can get
just to clear that up.
So you can get the COVID-19 vaccine, and then you can still get sick behind it. I mean, nothing is 100% guaranteed.
Well, right, yes, right. We hope that the COVID vaccine will be more effective than the average, than some years versions of the flu vaccine has been. But you're right. The COVID, that virus also, it also mutates because it replicates very quickly among a lot of human beings. And yes, it can mutate. In fact, the strain that's prevalent now is likelier to give you an infection, but less likely to make you very sick. That's actually a good thing. And it's a good thing for herd immunity too. Now, in terms of hydroxychloroquine is thought to help to prevent the virus from being able to multiply. You've got that correct. The role of Zithromax may be similar to that. Most folks are focusing on hydroxychloroquine, and in fact, there was just an analysis of 3 studies in terms of preventing the infection either before exposure, like among healthcare workers, let's say, or after exposure if somebody was known to have been exposed to someone, and it does appear to help. So we know there's been a lot of politics around hydroxychloroquine. That's the #1 reason that prescribers have been limited in their ability to prescribe it in the United States is politics, and it's very unfortunate. But yes, it may indeed be helpful.
What happens when we remove the politics from around it? Because at the end of the day, people want to live and be prosperous. And
that's right, of course.
Out of the equation, how can we live and best help our fellow Americans? But now when you have people restricting these different therapeutic medicines that could possibly prevent the contagion of the virus, I mean, I understand now that's the political side of it. Why do we allow politics to dictate to us who live or die?
You're right. We absolutely should not be doing that. And yet, look, no one has been more eloquent than you at describing how the opposition to President Trump is deeply ingrained in so many parts of the establishment in this country, including in academia, including in academic medicine. We have seen it at the highest levels of academic medicine.
Mhm.
It is very disheartening and very disgusting. So there are definitely, it does seem to me, and I'm not trying to sound histrionic here, but it does seem to me that much has been ignored or manipulated.
Mhm.
And, you know, we keep in mind that, you know, look, scientists have to look at evidence, and they have to actually not only look at the evidence that they find valid, because not, you know, some evidence is not. Some studies are very well done, others not so much. So you have to, you know, not only look at the evidence, but also you have to first decide, you know, how good is this evidence? You know, what's the quality of the data I'm looking at? So
Well,
there's been a lot of selectivity that's kind of broken against President Trump because
Yeah.
because they hate President Trump.
But I hear you say that, look at the evidence. And if the evidence is showing
Yeah.
that this virus is mutating, if the evidence is
Yeah.
showing that this virus is mutating, how are they able, how is the scientists and virologists, how are they able to
Mhm.
create a vaccine for a virus that continues
Right.
to change?
Sure. It depends on the way in which the virus mutates. In other words, it's kind of like looking at different models of a car. And, you know, if you have a Ford Mustang, then, you know, the 1972 model looks different from the 75, looks different from the 86, looks different from the 92, but they're all recognizable as Mustangs. So it's kind of that kind of thing. You know, there's enough of a fundamental trait that your body, you know, they select the trait for the virus that, you know, it'll be able to say, yeah, you know, it's the 92, but it's still a Mustang, go get it, if you will.
Yeah, but with everything that they're
Yeah.
doing, you know, our bodies were created for things to
Yes.
be done naturally. And sometimes
Right.
I feel for my body, I'm gonna talk about myself as Silk,
Yeah.
that I am better
Yeah.
off doing things naturally instead of with all of these chemicals being injected in my
Sure.
veins. And I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, because like you say, it's a trait of this, it's
Yeah.
something of that, but
Right.
it's to each his own.
Right.
It's to
Right.
each his
We're
own.
not telling
Well, this
anybody.
is true.
We're not telling anybody not to try vaccines or
Right.
whatever. We're not being
Right.
anti-vaccine. What we're saying is
No, which is,
that
that's wise. Yeah. Yeah.
something with a 98% recovery rate, I would prefer for me to try therapeutic
Right.
medicines, and I would prefer herd immunity. I'm not
Sure.
going to hide behind a
Right.
mask. I'm gonna
Right.
take this thing head on. Is what I would like.
That's right. Just like my president.
Sure.
I'm
Well,
gonna take it head
yeah,
on.
no, absolutely. You know, but that, all that said, you know, look, number one, you're absolutely right. No one should force you to get a vaccine. That's really fundamentally against America. And we know, and I'm not, in fairness, I'm not saying, therefore, we know the Democrats will force you to get a vaccine. I am not saying that, but I am saying the Democrats certainly tend to be mandate heavy.
Come
You know,
on.
they always try to put power in government. You
Mhm.
know, and you can just look at the case of Michigan. Now, Michigan's state Supreme Court has finally said that some of what Governor Whitmer is doing is actually against their state constitution, but she
Right.
still wants to dictate to people what they can do or not do. Public health can be tricky, okay? Public health is one of those areas where, you know, individual rights can bump up against, you know, the general public good. That's a fair statement. You know, if somebody has a horrible, deadly infection, and COVID, fortunately, you know, on a population basis is not that. But if somebody had a horrible, like Ebola virus, you know, I would not object to the government stepping in and saying, look, you know, person with Ebola virus, I'm sorry, but you have to be quarantined. You know, because Ebola virus is, you know, a horrible virus that can, you know, definitely kills lots and lots of people who get it. So in that case, it's much more clear cut. It's sort of like, no. I want public health to be able to step in and say, I don't want Diamond and Silk to get this from you. We'll deliver your groceries, whatever it is, but, and we'll help you recover. But, we don't have this thing under control. But in the case of COVID, you're quite right. Most folks who contract it are going to do just fine. And therapeutics are crucial. Thank God for President Trump and his common sense and his drive and his dedication to the American public to make those therapeutics available. But it's also great to have a vaccine that will accelerate herd immunity, because whether you're immune from having gotten the infection or immune from having gotten a vaccine, immune is immune, and that's good. So, for me, I'd rather get the option of getting the vaccine. I'd rather not, chance it with the virus. But I respect your right to have therapeutics.
And Dr. Nan, and for me, I'd rather have the option.
Right.
I just
Yeah,
want the option.
sure. No, exactly.
Our options are being taken away here, and dictatorship is tyranny is stepping in, and that's the part about all of this
Oh,
that
absolutely.
I do not like and I do not agree with.
Right. But moving forward,
No, I understand.
but you know what? Moving forward, you all, this was a great conversation, and even a great conversation just to be had, because we have to face this thing head on. We can't hide from it anymore. We can't run from it. We've been doing that for the past 7 months.
Yeah.
And if we continue to
Right.
let this thing control us, we'll
That's
keep
right.
running for days.
That's right.
So I'm glad that we had the conversation, Dr. Nan. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, breaking down some things and explaining some things to us. If we have any more questions, would you promise to come back and be with us on the show again?
I promise, and I hope you'll promise that I can be your guest again, because it's always a privilege, and I very much appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Nan. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. If you want to hear more of Diamond and Silk's podcast, go to Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Then press play to hear what Diamond and Silk have to say.